Bridgwater's town mill is at the end of Blake Street, appropriately enough previously known as Mill Lane, and is next door to the Blake Museum. The early history of the mill goes back to at least the Domesday Book in 1086, over 100 years before Bridgwater was founded as a town, and probably existed for a fair time before this. Essentially, the water from the Durley Brook rotated a wheel, which in turn rotated two great circular stones. These crushed grain into flour. That flour was used for making bread, the single most important foodstuff for everybody at the time. The building is quite small, hence also being known as the Little Mill, and it had a breast-shot watermill that ran in a bed of elite from the Durley Brook. This essentially means that water ran below the wheel to turn it instead of running over it. At some point, the mill was rebuilt in brick, probably in the 17th century, perhaps making it the oldest surviving brick building in the town, as the bricks were laid in what's called English bond, where one row of bricks is laid long ways and the next row is short ways, which was fashionable at the time. This humble but essential building ran continuously for centuries. In 1694, an agreement was drawn up by the town council allowing Richard Lowbridge, an ironmonger of Stourbridge, Worcestershire, and David Dunnell to dig up the streets of Bridgwater and lay water pipes from the town mill to a cistern constructed in the roof space above the old High Cross on the Cornhill, which once stood in front of what is now Lloyd's Bank. Until the end of the 17th century, Bridgwater obtained its water from local streams, mainly the Durley Brook, or from wells by the houses, or from stored rainwater. For the poorer residents of the town, who did not have their own wells, it was carried round the town by hawkers, who filled their carts at places like Horsepond Lane, which in 1680 had been fitted out to allow the inhabitants to gain water directly from the brook there. The 1694 agreement, involving the pipes and the town mill, sought to expand the provision of reliable water to the townsfolk. Both Lowbridge and Dunnell were partners in the Waterworks at Exeter and Barnstaple, so had experience in this sort of scheme. Since Dunnell was a carpenter, it is likely he was the engineering specialist for the pipes, building the wooden waterwheel and the machinery as well. A couple dozen waterworks were constructed at this time elsewhere in the country, to a pattern designed by a man called George Sorocold, 1668 to 1738, who was an English civil engineer, notable for pioneering work on water supplies and hydraulic power systems around Great Britain. It is likely that the waterwheel of Bridgwater's mill was about 15 feet in diameter, that's 4.5 metres in new money, and rotated at approximately 15 revolutions per minute, and drove through gearing a number of forcing pumps, which drew the water from the stream and pumped it through those wooden pipes trenched into the roadway, i.e. they dug a hole, laid the pipe and then backfilled, to the Cornhill cistern. It was probably Sorocold's pattern they were following. A Sorocold pattern water pump at Coltershore, West Sussex, is still operational. It was built in 1782 by the 3rd Earl of Egremont to supply the village of Petworth and Petworth House nearby. It was restored in 1976. The cistern at Cornhill had to be big enough to hold a supply of water during the time that the mill couldn't operate, usually due to high tides, and there needed to be water on hand in case of fire. It is likely that the corn milling machinery was attached to the same plant, so that water could be pumped during the miller's slacker times. Various wooden water pipes have been dug up from the streets of Bridgwater over the years. In 1795, for example, when the stone town bridge was replaced by the first iron one, in the 1830s when the gas mains were laid, and in the 1870s when the water company's pipes were laid. In 1917, more than 60 yards of elm water pipe were found in the bed of the Durley Brook in the garden of Ivy House in Friern Street. A complete section of large-bore wooden water pipe has recently been recovered from the bed of the Durley Brook next to the town mill. Just why pipes were sunk into the bed of the Durley Brook in this way is something of a mystery, but it could be due to the pollution from the tannery upstream. This is where animal skins were turned into leather, which was established at the bottom of Holspond Lane. It is likely the pipes in the stream drew clean water from beyond the tannery and were fed to the pump. The water pipes were usually made of elm or alder wood, oak being too expensive and much harder to bore. The whole was bored by a succession of hand-operated long augers, increasing in size. The ownership, operation and finances of the Bridgwater water service during the 18th century is not known. Water carriers would have taken the supply drawn from the cistern round the streets, and it is probable that some larger properties had an independent pipe supply as well. It is unlikely there were any public drinking fountains, since the owners of the water supply would have charged for every single drop they supplied. Virtually all buildings in Bridgwater would have used water butts or a cistern to collect rainwater for non-drinking use and for firefighting. Underground water cisterns for rainwater storage were sometimes constructed in large house properties from which the water could be pumped. So there would have been various water collection and distribution systems in use at that time. None of the tourist guidebooks published at the end of the 18th century mentioned the Waterworks. Joshua Gilpin, an American papermaker who toured industrial Britain between 1795 and 1805, noted in his diary on 12th of May 1796 that Bridgwater obtained its water from a cistern under the High Cross, which was supplied from a nearby stream, so it is clear that the plant was still operational then. However, the High Cross and the cistern were demolished about 1800, meaning the end of this system, and a steam-powered plant and reservoir projected to be built on St Matthew's Field, suggested in 1824, came to nothing. For the next 80 years, during which the town's population grew threefold, and there were frequent severe epidemics where many died, the town depended entirely upon rainwater butts and cisterns, wells, and what water was drawn from the Durley Brook and hawked around the houses. The town did not have a piped water supply until the late 1870s. The story of the dreadful epidemics is too complicated to form the basis of this video, so will form a book which is now being edited. The town mill then reverted to a simple corn mill early in the 19th century, and by 1858 had a steam engine to drive the grinding stones. By 1886, grain was no longer ground, and the milling machinery was used as a sawmill for cutting up pieces of wood. Then it fell into disuse and was then used as a food store. By the end of the 20th century, it was a builder's store. It came onto the market in 1987 and was purchased with a view of incorporating it into the Bake Museum. Several schemes for fitting it out were discussed, and a very comprehensive architectural and archaeological survey of the mill was made. But it all came to nothing, for the upper floor of the mill was destroyed by arson in 1995. Various outbuildings were then cleared and dangerous walls had to be lowered. In 2009, the site was transferred to the Town Council, along with the museum, by Sedgemoor District Council. From 2009, work was done on the mill, with the part that survived the fire being re-roofed and used as a museum storage area, and much rubble and debris was removed and a part refloored to give better access. However, there's still lots of work to be done. In 2017, the Town Council authorised the start of a project to rebuild the main part of the mill as it was before the fire. The space gained will be used to expand the resources of the museum. Later phases will include the restoration of the water wheel. The project is, however, temporarily in abeyance, but will hopefully resume soon. The mill, as humble as it looks, through supplying flour and water through the town's history, was essential to life in Bridgwater for a very long time and was once the lifeblood of our community.